everyone, this is Mike with Confused IT. In this video, I want to talk about a new script that we're going to be releasing soon for ESXi config backups. Essentially, if you're familiar with ESXi hosts and VMware, there is not a whole bunch of easy ways that I know of to be able to back up the configuration of that host. There might be solutions out there that do it, but I'm not too familiar with many of them. So a lot of times whenever we need to do a configuration backup, we're looking at running either some PowerShell command, some SSH commands on the host directly, and then trying to copy the file off of there, or using PowerCLI and remembering the commands and then trying to run the commands and going through this process of trying to get the config backups of the hosts. And well, there hasn't been a super easy way to out there of automating it. So I created a script that will not only automate the process of taking a backup of your ESXi host or hosts if you're using vCenter, but also the process for automatically running it on a given schedule. So I just kind of want to show you the script and go over it a little bit here and kind of show you how it works. So and I get the benefit of this would be, again, if your storage fails in your ESXi host and it doesn't boot anymore and you need to replace that host, you can reinstall ESXi. There are some different features of vCenter that I think can start to kind of roll out similar functionality that you may have had previously, but if you really wanted to have like an exact, go exactly back to the image that you had, or exactly back to the configuration you had of your host, you need a backup file. And if you have a backup file, you just have to copy it over to the host, run a few commands over SSH after you do the fresh install, and it'll put back all the stuff the way it was before it died. So it's super handy. You generally need it at the worst times. It's like you never think about it, and then you do like an ESXi upgrade, you forget to take a backup, and like boom, your servers, your host isn't booting anymore, and you have to go back, and you don't have to config anymore, and all these issues come up. So generally having it run in the background every so often is kind of a super helpful. It's been super helpful for me at least, but I'm sure it'll be helpful for others as well. So that's kind of the use case behind it. So this is our Confused IT GitHub page, and there is it's public repo with the utility in it. It's a PowerShell utility. I've tested it on PowerShell 5.1, I think. It should work on the really new PowerShell as well, the core versions like 7 and 6. I'm going to test that and just make sure, but there's nothing too crazy in here. Most of the commands are modern. I don't think anything really is too foreign, unless, of course, PowerCLI doesn't support the core versions. That I'm not sure about it. But if they support the core version, this script, I think, should work even on those really new versions. But the built-in version of PowerShell, which is, I think, 5.1 on Windows 10 and 11, it seems to work fine for. So, yeah. It's a release here. I'll be adding notes to this README that kind of goes over some screenshots and explanation of how to use the script, and also on our knowledge base, kb.computing.org, it'll show a page somewhere in here to go over the script and also the command and how to run it and everything, just to give you more of a documented approach as well. But I'm going to show you how to do it here on a test VM. So I'm going to use Windows Sandbox as a place to show you the script. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Windows Sandbox. It's essentially a Windows feature you can turn on. It's in Windows 10, the not the really old versions of 10, but some of like the relatively newer build Windows 10, and also Windows 11 it's in. And it allows you to kind of just click a button, have this desktop open up. You can test stuff out in here. You can break things. You can do whatever you want. As soon as you close this window, everything gets deleted that was in this sort of virtual machine. So it's a great place to test. It does have access to your local network, so any type of viruses or malware that might, ransomware that might try and traverse your network, definitely might want to turn off the network adapter on this sandbox, because it does allow traffic this VM can hit things on your network, so it could potentially access things that are on the network that you're on. So that's the only really concern. Other than that, I mean, it's a great place to kind of just open something up. We want to test out a bad link or something. You have Edge, you can install apps, you could, do whatever. So I'm going to show it to you here, just because it's going to give you a really clean kind of first use experience. I've run the script a bunch on my computer, so that would give you kind of it would kind of skip some of the initial steps that have to go through. So this is again the GitHub page. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the release, which is this updated version. I'm gonna get the source code. It's gonna download it. I'll go ahead and open that. Oops, I closed the whole window. I'm going to right click on this and go to properties, and I'm going to unblock it. This is kind of an important step. If you don't do this, it won't really run on its own when you schedule it. Just an FYI, make sure you unblock it. You can, if you've already extracted it, just unblock the PowerShell file. That's an really important step. Otherwise, when it tries to run in an automated fashion, it won't run. Okay, I'm just going to also copy this file right to our downloads folder so we have it there. Next thing is I'm going to open a PowerShell window as an administrator. This is a requirement that it runs as admin. Otherwise, it won't be able to do a lot of things. I'm just going to double check this to make sure. Yeah, this is unblocked as well. So, okay, we're good. So I'll go ahead and just cd into the downloads directory. And I'll do ls, and there is our ps1 file there at the bottom, PowerShell script. So we'll do this, ESXi. So we are going to probably hit an error right here. And essentially on a really, fresh install of Windows, scripts in general, running scripts are disabled. So you have to set an execution policy, and you can do that by doing set-execution policy. And then setting a parameter. I recommend researching this on your own, figuring out what works best for you. There are several parameters that can come into play here as far as different levels of security and who they apply to. So you can do something like, for example, I'll do unrestricted for mine, and this will essentially open it up, wide open to it can run anything, can be run, any script, at all. And there are other parameters, like you can set it to like all signed, remote signed, just different type of file signatures and kind of security verification checks, all those types of things. You can set different parameters on what it should allow. You can also set it to like only allowing the current user or the whole machine or stuff like that. So definitely research it a little bit to kind of give you the best of both, security and also the ability to run what you want to run. Unrestricted is kind of wide open, so just keep that in mind. I'm just doing it for this test here because it's the easiest thing to do. We'll clear it and we'll run it again. And so here's the welcome screen. So essentially there's a setup area. Everything in yellow is stuff that has to be set up for it to work properly. And then the manual flags are just things you can run one-off. And right now it's going to try to install this PowerCLI module. So you can see that nothing is done yet. Not yet complete, not enabled. And there, it's going to start with the install of the PowerCLI module. So PowerCLI or VMware PowerCLI is essentially kind of like a PowerShell library from VMware that includes a ton of commands and functions and stuff that allow us to be able to connect to a lot of their systems. vCenter, ESXi hosts, all kinds of stuff, and it allows us to kind of use PowerShell to automate things within their environment. And it's very, very extensive. There's a lot of features in it. I've only scratched the surface of it, and I'm using it to do ESXi backups. I once had something where I was able to, I had like lab servers, and I could run a script that it would sort of take a snapshot of all my VMs, put them in maintenance, power them all off, change disk types, boot them back up, do updates, power them all, do all kinds of neat things with your VMs and stuff. So it's a requirement for the backups to work. And the other thing that it the script installs, it's only a one-time install. Once it's done, the script loads much faster. It doesn't have anything in it yet to do updates of PowerCLI, so I might add that in the future, just to kind of check to see if any updates are available and to do those updates. But for now, it's just going to install whatever the latest version is at the time of running the script, and then once it sees it's installed, it's never going to really check it again. So now that that's done, if we were to run it just by itself again, just so you can see, it's going to go through. Okay, that's all it does. So it kind of just opens up and closes. It gives you that little brief indicator there. And I'm going to go ahead and do -set creds. That's the next piece here. Okay, so now it's going to ask us for our vCenter or host credentials. If you're connecting to the host, you just put in your root credential, your root login. If you're using your vCenter, you can use whatever account would work to log into the web interface. Will work here. And the password. Okay. Next step is set config. Okay, and we're going to do, again, the IP or host name of your ESXi host or vCenter. If you do the host, it's only going to do a backup of the host. If you do vCenter, it'll take a backup of everything that's online in your vCenter. So we'll go ahead and do... That's the host name of the vCenter. So now we have a choice for backup frequency. You can either do weekly or daily. I'm going to start off with weekly, because it will show you some other prompts that you won't get if you do daily. So we'll do 1. And so this is, obviously you don't get this if you do daily, so you have an option to have what day of the week. I'm going to do Fridays. And hit enter. And then there is what time of day. So this supports 12-hour time, so you can do AM, PM. You can do, a time colon a minute, and then, an hour colon minute, and then the AM, PM. So I don't know if it supports spaces. I would just keep it all together. So for example, I'll do 4:30 AM, and then the retention. And if you put it in 0, essentially it'll keep every backup that it takes forever. If you do a certain retention like 2 or 5 or 100 or whatever you want to do, it will remove the oldest ones first and sort of maintain that number. Which the backups are really small. I've had a similar script like this that I wrote a long time ago running on my home my VM backup server, and essentially it kept like it had hundreds of backups on there, and they were like maybe 50 megabytes. They're really not big backups. That's my environment. Other environments may be bigger if they have more backups. So do what makes sense for you. I'm gonna put in 2 right now just so you can see what the truncation process looks like, and I can show you kind of the retention later. So now it's going to ask us to confirm this information. It all looks good. If you have to type in the full word yes. If you just type in Y or not the word yes, it will re-ask you all the same questions again. So we'll hit yes, or type in yes, and the config is set. So now what I want to do is a run config, and what this will do is it'll just run the backup process with using that config as its reference, and so we can see if the credentials work, if it can establish a connection, if it everything goes to plan. So we'll hit run config. All right, so connected. Made folders, made the backups. I only have 4 hosts in there, and they're all there. They all are. It creates this directory for you. C scripts, config backup. So we'll go over there now and take a look. C scripts, config backup utility, ESXi backup. So here's the backups. Here's the files for each host. I don't know if I did a video on how to restore using these files. This is the the traditional VMware format that they want them in. So this all looks normal. If you need to, restore, I may have made a video on it. If not, there's definitely videos out there, and I will make one in the future that shows you how to use these files to do a host restore. It's a relatively straightforward process. Copy the file over, run a few commands after a fresh install of ESXi, and it'll go back to normal. So you'll see it timestamps the folders, and then if I go back here, there's some stuff in here. So it has a username. This is plain text, just the username. and then the AES.key and the encrypted are your password. And so it's not in plain text. It's in a a sort of gibberish file, both of them. I'm sure if you have the PowerShell file, the AES key, and the encrypted file, there's probably some reverse engineering way of getting the actual plain text password out of that, but it's kind of hard to avoid considering everything here is kind of plain text with the PowerShell script. So this is the best kind of security I can come up with for storing a password. At least it's not plain text. That's kind of the goal. So yeah, that's how that works. It's definitely not plain text, and you can't just read it. And it's probably not the easiest thing to reverse engineer, but it's probably very much possible. So config.json is your config file. You can see we have the host name here, or the address, the frequency, the day, the time, and the retention. And yeah, that's that. So we'll go ahead, and now that we know it works, we'll run the enable command. And so we can see these two are completed now. This is not completed, but it's working on it. And okay, came around, script enabled. And this uses, and we can see here that it actually just dropped the PowerShell script into this directory. This way you don't have to worry about making sure you didn't delete the folder wherever you put it. It puts it exactly where it needs to be in order for all this to work properly. So as long as you don't delete anything from this scripts directory, you're good to go. It'll put everything it needs to in here. So it uses Task Scheduler. So if we open up Windows Task Scheduler, which has been around for a very long time, it leverages that for the scheduling portion, which is kind of nice because it doesn't use any other utilities. It uses a built-in feature. And we can see here it created this ESXi config backup utility to run at 4:30 a.m. every Friday. Yeah, it's going to run on 7/22, which is a Friday. And I will go ahead and run, just so we can see it, I will run this scheduled task. Refresh. Task is running. And we'll watch it run here. This is if it fails here, if it just says running forever, and it does take some time. Eventually we'll start seeing the configs pop in here, but if you don't see it for like over 10 minutes, then you probably have to unblock the file, like I was mentioning before. Yep, there's the config files for the backup config files for the hosts. So you see all four of them pop in there, and then it makes a folder for them. And they are, again, time-stamped, and this should say complete. Okay. And then, so the next thing I'll show is with the utility, you can do so you can do run config like I did earlier, and that will, again, run backups without using the configuration file, so it just automatically runs, no problem, and it'll take the backups and put them in the directory. It will run retention if you do that, so it will it'll truncate down to the number of backups that you requested. If you do just run, it's essentially a manual one-off run, like I just want to do one backup. So you hit run. This will not use the config. It will just ask you for all the parameters each time, and it will put them in the same directory as everything else. So we'll go ahead and do a vCenter local. We're sure. You'll get prompted in a pop-up window for the credentials. And then it will connect, make sure the folders exist. There's the backups coming through. And done. And next, if you use this method, it will not do the retention, so it will just continue to create backups in there, for whatever. And you can go, if you don't want to do the the scheduling or anything, you could just go right to the script, just run at the end there, and it will just it'll do that every time. There's no need to if you just want to do a one-time backup, you don't have to go through the whole config and password setting process or anything. You just do run, and you can use it as a one-time utility. Still has to install PowerCLI if it's not installed, so that does take some time. But beyond that, you can just use it as much as you want. So now that that's done, if we were to do the run config again, and now that I have that retention, I have enough here where it should delete the oldest file. So the oldest file will be 538, and their retention is 2, I believe. So I'm using the config file just to make it nice and easy. And yep, it just deleted the older one that was there, and it just created a new one, 545, 543, 542. So if we run it again, the 542 one should disappear. Yep, 542 is gone. It'll make a new one now. Now the retention isn't exactly perfect. It is one off. My math is a little off there. It makes sense as far as only keeping 2, but it doesn't account for the new backup. So you're always gonna end up with kind of like one more than your retention, because it is gonna take a new backup. But I guess in the reason why I haven't quite fixed that yet is because the math is a little odd there. I have to kind of account for something that didn't happen yet. Not the end of the world, but part of the problem is also, let's say the backup fails, the new backup fails. So, I just delete. So let's say it ran right. I deleted one, the new backup fails. Technically, you're short. So you wanted to retain 2. I deleted 1. Now you have 2 in there. Right, 2 in there, and then doesn't. I guess that wouldn't work. I don't know why I didn't do it yet. I'll fix it. I'll fix it eventually, if it makes sense. I was thinking that you'd be 1 short if the backup failed, but I guess now you're ending with 3. So if your retention is 2, even if the backup fails, you still have 2. Yeah, it wouldn't leave you with just 1. So I'll have to look into that and see why it's doing that. But that's essentially the majority of this tool right now. The last feature in this that I'll show is, let's say you wanted to change the frequency, the configuration. So you could go into the task scheduler here and you could change it, the triggers, and you could readjust it here. I just don't recommend doing this because it would work, but again, if you use the script, it'll keep a log of everything, and it'll be kind of a little bit more robust. So what I'll do is, for that to work, you have to disable it. So we'll go ahead and do -disable. We'll run it. Should only take a second, and then when we go back here and refresh, that'll be gone. There is a check to make sure that it is not there when it creates it, so it won't be creating duplicates or updating existing ones. It has to be removed and re-added. There is some protection there for that. So now we can do set config again. You can see it's not enabled there. So it does identify that we have a config file already, and if it asks us we really want to replace it. So yes, we do want to replace it. And we'll go through these questions again. So host name, vCenter, corp local, frequency. Let's go daily this time. So you'll see it's going to skip right over that what day of the week question. Let's put 1 p.m. in. Retention, we'll go ahead and we'll do 4, and so if you do 0, I think it actually says unlimited here, or NA, or it doesn't say 0, but I should have done that as part of the example. But anyway, you see it says NA for day because obviously it's daily, so it runs every day. This is fine. We'll do yes. Config is saved. Now what we'll do is we'll enable it. Again, if you want to test the config, you can just do the run config, and you can see and make sure that your updates don't break anything. But the only part of the configuration that is part of the backup process is the host name. So as long as that doesn't change, that didn't change. The other parameters aren't really tested in that that run config. Those are only really applied when you do the scheduling process here. So we'll refresh. There's our new item. That was weird. And then we can see here it's 1 p.m. every day, and hasn't run yet. So that's how you would change one. And yeah, the other thing I'll do real quick I don't know if I can give you an example of it. I probably should have put something wrong in my config file to give you an example, but let's see if I can. It doesn't always let you change this, but let's see if it lets me change it. Yeah, I could. Okay, so you can actually edit the config file right here too if you needed to. There's not much that happens on the PowerShell side that doesn't change here. As long as the formatting's right, it should all work. So I broke the host name here. I put an extra A in. It's not going to work. So what'll happen now is if I do, let's say I run it as a task. Well, I'm going to open up event log. So the point that I'm getting to at the moment, is basically that the script does have event logging built into it through Windows Event Log. It's a little bit, it's not perfect. It can definitely be a little bit cleaner, and I will work on that in the future. But it does report things to here. So I'm guessing it probably already failed. Yep, completed. So here is the warning, 5:50 p.m. backup utility. I don't know why it abbreviates this. It's in there. It's in there, right? As it says backup utility, but when you go to details, it says ESXi config backup utility. So I don't really know why it just says backup utility, but it's close enough, and maybe I'll figure out one day why it's truncated there, and not like it's clearly not as long as desktop Windows Manager. So I don't know, I don't know why they truncated mine. Anyway, here's my my error message here. Failed to connect to vCenter. This may indicate an issue with the network credentials or PowerCLI. There are some errors baked around the application, around the PowerShell script that kind of give you different information when something breaks, and it reports it to the application log in Windows Event Viewer, Windows Event Log. So that's one way, if you're having trouble, if you want to make, if you have some sort of system that integrates with your event log, an RMM of some kind maybe, and you can monitor event logs, take a look at some of the, errors that are in here every so often, and maybe you can see, you can set up an alert or something like that around these error messages, and I'll try and create more in there. And if someone really uses them, I don't really use them. If somebody uses them a lot and they can point out some errors that are happening and stuff that they like to be logged, I can go in and add those features as well. So yeah, that's it. Sorry. The whole point of the config change was I wanted to point at this too. When you make a config change and there is an existing config, it does back up your old config. So if I didn't know why it was broken or something, it's a really simple config file. Maybe in the future it'll get more complicated, but for now, it's kind of already, not a necessary feature, but it was already in there when I built something else, so I just kind of copied it over. And essentially what it'll do, there's my wrong one. If I go into the config backups, I can see the last config, which obviously has the right hostname and the weekly and the Friday and all that stuff. So it does keep backups of all the config files. So, all right, that's finally it, I think. That's everything with this script. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Our website has some resources that you might find useful as well. Confused IT is a non-for-profit organization ran by IT professionals. Our mission is to make IT knowledge more accessible and easier to digest. Thanks for watching.